The moment I unfolded that bright orange paper, my heart pounded like a drum. Remove your boat within 48 hours. It read, signed by the local HOA. My boat? On my lake? They had no idea the water, the land, every inch of it belonged to me. They'd learn soon enough. For years, I dreamed of peace. A quiet place away from the noise, deadlines, and chaos of my old life in Silicon Valley. When I sold my software company, I wanted nothing more than silence, coffee at sunrise, and a view of still water. That's when I remembered Sullivan Lake. My grandfather bought that 50-acre lake back in the 1950s. Just a fisherman with a stubborn streak and a dream of preserving nature. He built a small wooden cabin on the western shore and taught me that water was sacred. "Protect it, Jake," he'd say. "It's not just land. It's legacy." After his passing, and then my father's, the property became mine. For years, it sat empty. Too many deadlines, too many excuses. But now, with money in the bank and time finally on my side, I returned. I renovated the old cabin but kept its soul intact. The smell of pine walls, the creak of floorboards, the same fishing pole hanging by the window. Every morning I'd sip black coffee on the dock and watch mist dance across the surface. It was perfect, until the letter came. One morning, I saw something bright taped to my grandfather's old boat. It was a violation notice, neon orange, bold black letters screaming, "Unauthorized watercraft." They wanted my boat gone within 48 hours. First, I laughed. Surely this was a mistake. But when I checked my mailbox, there it was again. Official letterhead from Maple Creek Estates Homeowners Association. They even threatened a daily fine. That's when the peace I'd built began to crack. Someone thought they could push me off my lake. And I was about to find out exactly who had the audacity to try. I read that notice at least 5 times. Each word made less sense than the last. Unauthorized watercraft, community standards, aesthetic violations. My boat wasn't some rusty eyesore. It was my grandfather's legacy. I decided to pay them a visit. The HOA office was located at the edge of the Maple Creek development, a cluster of oversized houses surrounding neatly trimmed lawns and plastic smiles. Behind a polished wooden desk sat Karen Mitchell, the vice president. She smiled the way snakes do before they strike. "Sir, all boats on the community lake must meet our standards," she said. "Community lake?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "You mean Sullivan Lake?" She blinked, then straightened her papers. "It's managed by the HOA now." That's when the truth hit me. They weren't mistaken. They were claiming ownership of my lake. I left that office with my blood boiling and my mind spinning. On the drive back, I called the only man who might know what was going on. My neighbor, Ray Delgado. Ray had lived down the shore for 50 years. When he picked up, I told him about the letter. He sighed deeply. "Jake, they've been pulling this nonsense for years, acting like they own everything within sight. But that lake, your grandfather made sure it had never belonged to anyone but the Sullivans." That calmed me, but only for a moment, because as I looked out over the water that afternoon, I noticed something else. Tire marks near the eastern shore, tents, trash, footprints. Someone had been using my property, and I had a bad feeling I knew exactly who. The next morning, Ray came by with a thermos of coffee and a look that said he had stories to tell. He sat on my porch and leaned forward, voice low. "They've been running fishing tournaments, Jake. On your lake. Big ones. They call themselves the Elite Anglers Club." He took a sip and shook his head. "Bunch of HOA execs and rich folks with fancy gear. They set up tents, play country club by the water, and act like they own the place." I stared at him, stunned. "You're saying they've been trespassing here for years?" He nodded slowly. "Yep. Your granddad would have run them off with a shotgun full of rock salt." We both laughed, but there was no humor in it. Ray told me their president, some guy named Richard Wilkins, was the real power behind the HOA. Smooth talker, ruthless, thought the rules bent for him. That night, curiosity got the better of me. I went online and looked up Maple Creek Estates. My jaw dropped. There it was, photos of their annual fishing event. A big banner reading, 15th Annual Elite Anglers Tournament, Maple Creek Estates. People were laughing, drinking, standing on my docks, grilling on my land, and not one mention of the word Sullivan. It was as if my family had been erased. That's when I stopped being angry and started getting strategic. The deeper I dug, the uglier it got. Their official website proudly listed the lake as community property. They even charged residents access fees to fish on my water. And they'd been doing it for 5 years. I scrolled through post after post. Photos of their members-only fishing club, barbecues, and trophies. They called the lake Maple Creek's crown jewel. I couldn't believe what I was reading. It was more than arrogance. It was theft, slow, sneaky, well-dressed theft. And it was time to hit back. I called my old college friend, Emma Porter. She was an environmental lawyer, smart, tough, and allergic to injustice. After I explained everything, she practically laughed through the phone. "Wait," she said. "You own the lake? Like the deed and water rights?" "Yep." "Then they're not just wrong, Jake. They're trespassing, collecting money from property they don't own." Emma told me to gather proof before confronting them. Record everything. Photos, videos, documents. They'll try to bury you in paperwork. Don't give them a chance. That night, I set up security cameras around the lake. Every dock, every path, every spot where I'd seen signs of activity. The motion alerts were silent, but I knew soon they'd speak volumes. Because if the HOA thought I'd just roll over, they hadn't met a Sullivan before. And as my grandfather always said, you don't win a fight with noise. You win it with evidence. By the weekend, Emma drove up to the cabin. We spread old deeds and survey maps across my dining table. The air smelled like coffee and war. "These documents are airtight," she said. "Your grandfather was smart. He even included water rights and 15 feet of shoreline buffer in the deed." Then she showed me something else, county development records. The HOA's original plans specifically excluded Sullivan Lake. "They've been lying to their residents," Emma said, tapping the file. "They never had legal control." That night, we talked strategy. If we moved too soon, they'd spin it as a misunderstanding. But if we waited, we could expose their entire operation. Emma smiled. Let them hold their tournament. Let them hang themselves on camera. So we did. We drafted a polite letter requesting all HOA documents related to lake ownership, just to see what excuses they'd invent. At the same time, I registered the domain sullivanlackeytrust.org, preparing for what came next. For the first time in weeks, I felt calm, because I wasn't just going to fight back. I was going to end their little empire. When I walked into their community center, the room smelled like expensive perfume and cheap power. The walls were covered in photos of HOA achievements. And at the front stood Richard Wilkins, perfectly combed silver hair, fake smile, voice dripping with authority. He talked about lawn heights, mailbox colors, and community pride. Then he said it. "We must preserve the pristine beauty of our lake." I raised my hand. "Excuse me." I said, "Who owns the lake?" The room went quiet. Wilkins hesitated. "The lake is managed by the HOA for the benefit of residents." "So," I said, "you have a deed for it?" Murmurs spread. His face tightened. "That's not relevant right now." I smiled. "It's very relevant. Because according to my family's records, Sullivan Lake was never part of Maple Creek Estates." You could feel the tension shift. I watched his eyes flicker. He knew exactly who I was. But instead of answering, he moved on to the next agenda item, pretending I didn't exist. By the end of the meeting, I'd seen enough. They weren't just bullies, they were hiding something. And the next time we met, I'd make sure they couldn't lie their way out. The next morning, my boat was gone. Only a paper notice fluttered against the dock. Property seized for non-compliance. They had stolen my grandfather's boat. That was the breaking point. I called the sheriff, but the deputy brushed it off as a civil matter. That's when I knew these people had power in town. By the time Emma returned that weekend, I was done being polite. We gathered every document, every photo, and every minute of security footage. The cameras had caught them in the act. HOA members hosting events, fishing, and even installing a temporary dock. "This is gold," Emma said. She drafted a cease and desist and prepared to file an injunction. But I had one more idea. Let them walk right into their own trap. Their annual fishing tournament was in 2 days. They were about to host it on my property without permission. This time I'd be waiting. The day of the tournament dawned bright and clear. Dozens of trucks rolled in, hauling expensive boats and coolers. Tents popped up along the shore, laughter echoing across my land. Emma and I watched from the tree line. Every camera was rolling, every trespass recorded. Then, right on cue, Richard Wilkins arrived with 3 investors in tow. They weren't here to fish. They were here to see his future resort. He pointed at my property like he owned it. "Exclusive lakefront," he said. "We already control it. Just finalizing the paperwork." Emma turned to me. "Got him." An hour later, the sheriff's deputy I'd called the night before arrived, court order in hand. Emma stepped forward, voice calm but commanding. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is private property. You are trespassing." Confusion rippled through the crowd. Someone shouted. "But the HOA said." "The HOA lied," Emma said. And with that, the entire facade began to crumble. Wilkins stormed toward me, face red, voice shaking. "You have no idea what you've done." I smiled. "Actually, I do. You've been caught on camera committing fraud, Richard." He froze. The investors were already backing away, their money walking out with them. As deputies escorted the HOA off my land, the lake fell silent again. Finally mine, as it always had been. Within a week, the story hit the news. HOA caught using private lake illegally. President under investigation. Residents were furious. They'd been paying fees for lake access that never existed. Richard Wilkins resigned, disappeared overnight. The county opened an investigation into missing HOA funds. Emma helped me establish the Sullivan Lake Conservation Trust, a nonprofit that allowed respectful public access under my control. No greed, no lies, just balance. A few of the decent HOA members even joined the new board. As for my boat, it was returned, freshly cleaned, with an awkward apology note taped to the side. Grandpa would have laughed. That night, I sat on the dock the same way my grandfather used to. The lake was quiet again. No banners, no loudspeakers, no trespassers. Just peace. I thought about how close I'd come to losing what mattered most. Not through force, but through quiet deceit. And I realized something. Sometimes, standing your ground isn't about anger. It's about patience. You don't need to shout to win. You just need to know the truth and let it speak for itself. When the sun dipped below the water, I smiled. Because finally, Sullivan Lake was home again.